Good afternoon and welcome to the Preservation Association of Lincoln Brown Bag Lecture Series. My name is Eileen Burt and I'm the coordinator of these brown bags. The videotaping today is sponsored by the Historic Preservation Fund of the U.S. Department of the Interior through the Nebraska State Historical Society and the City of Lincoln, a certified local government. Our speaker today is Ed Zimmer. Ed has been a historic preservation planner for the Lincoln Planning Department for over 30 years. He has also been a member of the Lincoln School Board for 19 years. Ed is a native of Omaha and spent a decade studying and working in Boston, earning a PhD in American Studies from Boston University in 1984. While in Massachusetts, he freelanced as a researcher and writer for clients including the Peabody Museum at Harvard University, Lowell National Historic Park, and the Smithsonian Museum of American History. Our speaker today, or Ed's talk today is titled, And the Winner Is. And this is a recap of the PAL's 25th annual award ceremony, which was held in March. Please join me in welcoming Ed Zimmer.
Thank you for being here. See if we can add a little bit to the March presentation. And I think it is worth noting a quarter century of awards and a quarter century of brown bag talks, I think, are both something well worth celebrating. And much glory should go to Eileen for keeping this going, and to PAL as a whole. One of the special things about the annual awards program is the choice of the venue each year, because we visited some very special places, sometimes places in need of preservation attention, sometimes places in need of celebration. This year, I think, was more on the celebration end. If you remember in the past, PAL started in the old courtroom of the old federal building, this beautiful 1905 courtroom, which looked like this with the drop ceiling and the fluorescent tubes when PAL started there all those years ago, and then became a place for celebration as well when it was restored as the function room and the celebration place in Grand Manse, now a housing project and commercial project. But a beautiful room, even the windows, not only the ceiling has been revealed, but the windows were reopened, giving grace back to that beautiful room. Visited Whittier early on and then came back again to celebrate. Been out to Whitehall, the mansion, the old Layton farm, right on the edge between College View and University Place. Wyuka Chapel has been the site of the annual awards program, mid-1930s Davis and Wilson building. And Trinity Church, and I think we might find an occasion to go back and celebrate there again, as this has just been announced, has found a new congregation that are purchasing it, Faith Presbyterian, to reestablish it as a neighborhood church in that neighborhood, 16th and A. There also are the Shearly Fun venues, but I guess we were probably also celebrating the return of the Rooster to Lee's Chicken at West Van Dorn and Coddington when we had the annual meeting there. And some in perhaps a step of mourning, the last visit to the original Valentino site. But I also like this picture because we did manage to take that sign and have it moved to the new location just across the street. So the sign is still there, there's still pizza there, and the building never was the original building, at least not for very long. It was always being transformed. So it was more thoroughly transformed this most recent time. Visited the Wyuka Stable a few years back after its restoration. And then didn't visit this church because the mid-1880s St. Paul Methodist Church burned down in 1899, but some of the stones became part after the fire of the new church. So some of the arches in the red brick are the old stones of the 1900 St. Paul's. And I had to one good thing about these visits is I get to research the building again, and a building that I think I'm familiar with, I learn more about, such as the bells were planned for that tower from the start, but then they got worried when they installed the McKinley bells, probably especially when they rang them, and took the tower off about 1910, because you could have bells or you could have steeple, but you couldn't have both, is what their engineers told them. So the bells are still there, and the church is still there, with the beautiful addition a century after the original construction. So this year, we'll get to the venue because it was one of the winners as well, but we'll step our way through the awards. PAL is always given a residential rehab award. Much of the preservation activity at any local level is people working on their own houses, and there's always much to celebrate there. Several years back, we celebrated the rescue of the old Levitt farmhouse, which had been moldering away at 70th and O, and then the Brave family picked it up, moved it out to South 148th, and made it into Prairie Creek Bed and Breakfast. And as soon as I stop trying, I'll remember their name. Bruce and Maureen Stair. I heard the other day giving one of these tours, when I had trouble with a name, that somebody who was good friends of the family that used to be the landlords of John Neihart said that in John's later years, when he would have that same trouble, he would go, "The dog's chasing it." The dog gets very tired sometimes, but we could all use that, and we can quote Neihart. The Stairs did the beautiful work on this house. This is the steakhouse at 28th and N Streets, George Berlinghoff design, very rare George Berlinghoff bungalow, National Register and local landmark, and the James family received the award for their work on this house. The Frank and Anna Hall house at 11th and D Streets, and the Baker family are taking lovely care of it. Last year we were looking at Don Love's first house, so this would be First Love. There is a second Love house also in the near south neighborhood, but a beautiful house on E Street, probably a Ferdinand Fisk design, and put back in beautiful shape, including that lovely balustrade on top of the porch and a paint job that just brings out all of the features of that house. And then this year, the award went to the family rescuing, breathing fresh life back into a family home, their family home, in fact. This is the George and Hazel Abel house at 2335 Sheridan Boulevard. A Ferdinand Fisk design of the mid-teens for that family, so prominent for really all of the 20th century and into the 21st in construction, building materials, baseball, all of those Abel businesses. And we've seen the house go from white to brown, and then a lovely paint job picking up detail there as well. An awful lot of work went into this rehab, before, during, and after. I also appreciate the folks that provide all the pictures of these to make both the awards program and this program so much more fun. Beautiful details in this house. Again, before, during, and a lovely after. So for the rescue, beautiful rehab of the George Hazel and Alice Abel house, Alice, their daughter who lived there until 2005, Adam and Andrea Letherby. And I wasn't perfectly clear when I was doing this presentation, and then Tom Tallman, Andrea's dad, sent me a note saying, it's a family home again. When the Abels sold to the intermediate owner, included a provision that for 10 years, if the family chose, they could repurchase it. And Andrea is the great-granddaughter of Hazel and George, and made the decision it was time for it to be an Abel home again, or Abel let to be home again. And so here we have Adam and Andrea receiving from Bill Wood, the PAL president, the Residential Rehab Award. And that picture was just too good not to use twice. Stewardship of a significant property has honored a distinguished group of properties over the years, and these typically are ones that are not an immediate rehab, but a tradition that a family or an owner has been taking care of a property for year after year. And the Retzloff farmhouse, probably the oldest occupied building in Lancaster County from 1867, out in Stevens Creek, still on the Retzloff farm, was very characteristic of that stewardship award. Sheldon and its beautiful renovation and just a tradition of keeping that monumental building in fine condition was honored a couple of years ago. Capitol itself has been, I think, an honor to the whole state and to the Office of the Capitol Commission and the craftspeople and architects, designers who've gone into the rehab of that building and its restoration over the past several decades. The pot of gold at the end of the architectural historian's rainbow. A couple of years ago, it was First Plymouth. This beautiful drawing of that great tower, what I think of as the second best tower in Lincoln, which is no shame at all when the best tower is the Capitol. Some of its stained glass detail, and that transitions us into this year's winner, which isn't a building or a single project, but a craftsman of very high caliber, Harry Tompkin and his Palace Glass Company, who's been creating new stained glass and renovating historic stained glass in Lincoln and the surrounding area for decades and decades, and has really contributed to so many buildings in the community and in the surrounding region. This beautiful door and side light. Our postcard this month, which sometime we'll have to fund postcards in color, because this one is beautiful in black and white, but spectacular in color. Harry's company has done a lot of church work and restored many, many church windows, as well as residential pieces. And so the Stewardship Award this year, really kind of a Lifetime Achievement Award to someone we're very fortunate to have in the community, went to Harry Tompkins and Palace Glass Company. And Harry received the award again from Bill Wood, the PAL president. I always look better if there's stained glass on the same page with me, so I thought I'd do them the honor as well. PAL also distinguishes between the residential properties and the commercial and institutional, because they're such different categories and such different contributors to the community as a whole. And so a wide range of properties have been honored in the past. This is the Lancaster block and Havelock that Bob and Vicki Rokeby took from a building that looked very neglected into a wonderful anchor piece again on Havelock Avenue. And this was a building that really was kind of a starting point of the community of Havelock. The development company, Lancaster Land Company, that was promoting the town, built this building to show everybody else what they should build along Havelock Avenue. And a few were able to follow that example. But a beautiful building on the National Register. And I'm going to move right into this year's awards because I had so many available pictures of them. What was honored this year for institutional rehab was the whole class of Fisk and McGinnis designed primary schools, elementary schools of Lincoln Public Schools, because there's a beautiful collection of 1920s school buildings that are still in daily use, designed by that firm. Ferdinand Fisk was in Lincoln from the late 1880s until his death in 1930. He partnered with Harry McGinnis from about 1915 till 1925. And in that decade, they produced a wonderful group of buildings, residential, institutional, commercial, religious in the community. First of the completed school buildings that still stands and is in use by that firm in Lincoln is Hartley School, begun about 1919, and this was their drawing for Hartley. Proudly shown in the booster books of the early 20s in Lincoln, and then before its recent rehab and after. Feels to me like these buildings can see again when the windows become clear. And even a gymnasium addition, which is not an easy thing to add to a small elementary building and not overwhelm it, I think was very nicely positioned and then nicely detailed to still respect the original character of the building. Elliott School of about 1922, and this is the back of the building. Backs of buildings should always look this wonderful, although they usually don't need to, but this is a building that has a neighborhood front and then sort of a city front towards Antelope Valley and the Capitol and downtown. Here's the city front, very fine view as well, with a lovely terracotta entryway with the name of the school in terracotta and then the Elliott Owls beside the entrance. Prescott, right about the same time. If I'm speaking to a Prescott audience, they were the first of these big, beautiful schools. If I'm speaking to an Elliott audience, they're the first, because they're both about the same, 1921, 22, 23. And Prescott, similarly, in almost all of these Fisk and McGinnis buildings have a big, bold, beautiful entryway in terracotta, as does Prescott. Again, with the name right inscribed across the front. And then the last of the Fisk and McGinnis contributions, although McGinnis and Schaumburg went on and did additional schools for LPS, was Clinton School. Schaumburg joined with Fisk and McGinnis in 1925, and we see all three names on Clinton, this beautiful C-shaped embrace of its front parking, or its front playground, and again, commissioning the name of the school and the school date at the main entrance in terracotta. So Lincoln Public Schools was honored for that whole body of work on those great buildings, keeping them in vibrant condition, and all of them with 21st century heating and cooling, because under their playgrounds or under their parking lots are well fields to draw the energy of Mother Earth to heat and cool the building through all the seasons. And it's particularly fun that Scott Wieskamp, the director of operations for LPS, and my former school board colleague, Richard McGinnis, grandson of Harry McGinnis, received the award for LPS. I'm not sure which of them is the Elliott Owl, but I love that symbol, so it came back again too, with Bill Wood. A couple of years after the award started, Pal recognized that there were certain projects that weren't strictly preservation projects, but really contributed to the same kind of vibrance of the place we live and supported broader preservation activities, even if the project itself is farmers market a preservation activity. Not strictly, but it does breathe life into the city and into a part of the city that we want to see lively. Jazz in June's been honored, Star City Parade in the past. This year, it was the venue itself, Robbers Cave, and I'll go back a little bit on its history. Began as the beer caves, dug out, the beer cellars, cooling caves, under this very, very early pioneer brewery. As far as I know, this is the best picture. So take your glasses off, squint, and we can pretend, but it was a big, substantial building of about 1867, and built right against the sandstone bluff of the caves. Jacob Andra, interviewed in the early 20th century, recounted his experience over, I think, about 15 months or a year and a half, digging out those caves with pickaxe and shovel for the purpose of cooling beer brewed in that brewery. The brewery did not last very long. The caves did. When the building was long gone, there still were that set of tunnels through the Dakota Bluff. And here we see an early view of the entrance, I think from the west side looking in. And then in the 1950s, a couple deputies wondering if they're going to have to go in, and they've got their flashlights ready. The to see what might be afoot in the caves at that time. Just in the last couple of years, Blvd Brewery, one of the new craft breweries that are proliferating in Lincoln and really across the country, rebuilt not on the foundations of the old brewery, probably a little further east at the top of the bluff, but with access through their basement and through their brewing operation back down into that same set of tunnels. So that, as we say in preservation, the best reuse is the original use, and that's more or less how it's being used today. In between, it was probably mostly used as a tourist attraction and a place to be cool in the hot summer, and it's being used for that again, both a tourist attraction to Blvd and a fun tour if you choose to go through from the brewery, and they are cooling beer. So here are preservationists underground looking at the old walls and the old excavation of that brewer's cave with names you recognize carved into the walls, and they've been carved in for a century plus. Beginning very early in the 20th century, Scarborough family acquired the caves, which had been in whatever use they were in from the 1860s till 1900. Probably not every use that gets mentioned, because a lot of that, this is a place that has generated legends over a long period of time. It's probably generated a fair share of lies as well, and now it's back to generating lager. So those are my 3 L's for Robbers Cave. But great fun of the inscriptions and graffiti and names and dates carved into the walls of that soft Dakota sandstone. And it's one of the few places you can go and be inside the bedrock under us and really see that whole beautiful color range and striations across. It's sort of our little bit of Badlands down under a brewery. I think I even recognize the back of the head and the French braid there. So for truly an integration of old and new, Blvd Brewing Company, Studio 951, the architects of the project, were honored for the reuse of Robbers Cave, and Dave Johnson of Studio 951, and Sam Manzito representing Blvd, but also the active contractor in all of that work, received the award from Bill Wood, PAL's president. Becky.
Joel Green is the tour guide, and he's the one that put together a history of the area.
Yeah.
Former student of mine too, I might write, but anyways.
Becky Martin, retired LPS. Well, you're probably still subbing almost every day, so you're not very retired.
No.
Mentions Joel Green, who's working on assembling the facts, lies, and legends,
Yes.
probably of Robbers Cave. City Center Award is a category somewhat like integration of old and new. And in fact, I had sort of jumped over from old and new to City Center. The parade, farmers market, Jazz in June are City Center Awards. And this year was to an alley. We did, I think this is the second alley. I think Barrymore's alley was honored in the past as well. But this is that alley which connects P and O streets between 7th and 8th streets. It's been a popular place for senior photos, apparently a popular place for wedding engagement photos. It used to be as I would walk down that alley, there was almost always glitter on the ground. I don't generate glitter, but unicorns and senior photos apparently do generate glitter. Very plain industrial alley with all of its wires and transformers hanging. And down the view on the right-hand side, the red brick painted stucco on that side of Ann Burkholder's Burkholder project. And Ann, for some years, has been taking some of her artist's work from in the building that particularly engaged her attention and displaying it on the alley wall of the building. So this is some of that beautiful Mary Kolar found objects interpreted into fanciful sculpture. The city picked up on that theme and also built a parking garage at the south end of the alley with its access point right at the end view of that alley. And the mayor and urban development department and other city staff, working with adjacent neighbors, came up with the notion of expanding on Anne Burkholder's art concept and turning this into Gallery Alley. There were two ways you could go. You could spend all of your money taking out the electrical equipment that was there, that was in active use, or you could have that be the theme of the alley. And I think everyone endorsed from earliest point that alleys have wires, alleys have transformers, alleys have poles, but decorative alleys might have even more wires, and some of those wires might light up at night. And more art was added, more color was added. A lighting designer from California, Patrick Quigley, was engaged to help design the overall effect. Anne Burkholder was engaged to acquire and install additional art in the alley. And so Gallery Alley as that bright enhanced walkway connecting 7th NP and the parking garage on O Street through a fun public walkway was dedicated. And I think both Anne and the mayor were very glad. I think we have photo documentation of that. So the prize went to Gallery Alley for City Center this year and was received by Hallie Salem, representing the city through the Urban Development Department. Was the city's project manager on it, standing beside Anne Burkholder. Amy Green of Ivana Cone, one of the adjacent businesses, who has opened a ice cream purveying door on or window on Gallery Alley, just what it needed. And Bill Wood, again representing PAL as president. Great Commoner Award is the city's, or the PAL's recognition of efforts in preservation education. And this year was awarded to a neighborhood association, the Woodsshire Neighborhood Association, for many efforts in enhancing and protecting the qualities of that spectacular little neighborhood at 20th and High Streets, 17th to 20th High to Calvert. It's a 1925 Woods Brothers development designed by the Lincoln landscape architect Ernst Herminghaus. They even commissioned Herminghaus to do a beautiful little booklet about the neighborhood as it first opened. That was part of the neighborhood association's effort, was to reprint that and distribute it among themselves and to new neighbors. And I think much of preservation work is both projecting the strengths of an area and then sharing that with new residents. That is preservation, particularly in a residential area, to continue to find and attract and bring in your new neighbors. The neighborhood association there continues to be the owner of the little parkland on the west side and maintain it, and they maintain their little beautiful traffic circles that dot the corners of these intersections. This was the cover of that booklet that Herminghaus did, that beautiful drawing, and the drawings within the booklet as well that are shared with the neighborhood. And Woodsshire Homeowners Association was the official recipient, and it was received by Bob Puschendorf, representing the State Historical Society as the deputy SHPO. And I could try to remember the names, but I'm going to find my list because then I'll actually get them right. Next to Bob, on second from left Rusty Devine, and then Emily Fauble, I believe still current, but I know certainly has been president of the Homeowners Association, Don Fritz, and then of course Bill Wood. I think it's a key element of that neighborhood that this neighborhood association, this homeowners association, continue to be the vibrant caretakers of the special places and the whole heritage of that area. President's Award was a category that I think started a couple of years after the awards began, but it recognized both the president's service in the preceding year and then gave the president special opportunity to recognize someone who had made a special contribution to the organization or to projects through the year. Bill and Myrna Wood have a remarkable collection of historic properties, their own house and others, and it takes a collection of historic craftspeople to keep those places and repair them. And Bill, in the last 2 years, has honored some of his special craftspeople who have kept things going and put them back together. And that includes both his big houses, and this is the little house that was the house on the corner. Bill and Myrna live at 8th and D. Originally, William Tyler lived in this house at the corner before he built the big one and moved this into his backyard, sort of as his garden house. But it's now in nice condition as well. And it was Herbert Davidson that Bill honored with the President's Award this year, who can crawl up those very high scaffolds and assess and then repair what needs to be done on buildings like Parkview Manor, or Parkview at 33rd and L Streets facing Woods Park. Some of that beautiful work is Herbert's work, and Bill wanted to recognize some years of work together on these major projects. And then finally, the Lifetime Achievement Award in local preservation, named for former Mayor Helen Busalis, who was a trustee of the National Trust of Historic Preservation, as the president of the National Conference of Mayors, was a strong proponent of preservation at the municipal level, and was a strong advocate of PAL. In fact, ordered us to create this organization, whether we intended to or not, whether it was our business or not. And since she said it was, apparently it was, and then was a financial supporter of PAL for years as well. Although I promised when we instituted this award, we didn't want her money, we wanted to borrow just her name. Every year after, she would call and say, "How much do I give for that?" And every year she increased it. A very honorable award to carry that name. A year ago, we honored Mike Smith on his retirement from a decade as director of the State Historical Society and State Historic Preservation Officer, and we got Mike's deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Bob Puschendorf, to come and receive that a year ago because Mike happened to be out of town at that time. If you could read the label, it says Busalis Bob Puschendorf for Michael Smith on his tag. It's always good if you can to get the honoree there without knowing they're going to be honored. A little hard to do. I can't remember if we told Bob that we needed him to stand up with Woodsshire or quite how he was gotten to this year's, but Bob was the honoree. We couldn't have the award at the top of the Capitol, but a favorite picture of young Bob up with the sewer. Both of them wearing, looks like hard hats, but that was during the sewer's renovation. And then Bob, and this is kind of his official retirement photo, retired as Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer and head of the Historic Preservation Office at the Historical Society just this year. And we got him there, and he didn't know he was being honored. And this year, he got the award with the Busalis name on it, and his own name on it as well. And so another successful Busalis Surprise Award to a very deserving longtime Nebraska preservationist and strong Lincoln preservationist as well. And that brought together this whole happy crew at Blue Blood Brewery with tours of the caves afterwards. I don't know if we'll ever have an annual meeting without beer again. It seemed to be a strong enhancement of the event. So we have the Letherbys at the left, then moving through the Great Commoner Awards, Harry Tompkins, Bob Puschendorf in the middle, right behind Helen Busalis. Hallie Salem brought her daughters Claudia and Ella along, and behind them is Herbert Davidson, and then our Dave Johnson right above the Salems for Blue Blood itself, Scott Wieskamp, Amy Green. We also always need to honor somebody who makes ice cream. So I think that should be one of the requirements of the annual award. And Sam Manzito on the far right. So a very happy event, I think a very successful annual meeting, and I'm happy to be back to share it again with this brown bag presentation. I will take questions. I will not take questions about whether these were good honorees. That's a given, but I will take any other questions, and I'll try to remember to repeat them so Becky doesn't have to hit me with the repeat sign. It says repent. Okay.
Yes.
Any questions today?
On those schools, what would you say the style of the architecture of those schools are?
What's the style of the architecture of the schools?
I mean, one of them almost looked Norman, perhaps, in the way that it was, I don't know, Gothic?
I think of the Fisk and McGinnis schools largely as kind of Elizabethan, or that sort of corrupt Jacobean term of Jacobean and Elizabethan. Whittier, which we didn't include in this group because it's not LPS anymore and has been honored in the past for UNL's work on it, is neoclassical, certainly. But most of the Fisk and McGinnis we see, I think, are more in that period revival, looking somewhere towards England. When McGinnis and Schaumburg do Irving Junior High in 1927, I think we'd call it collegiate Gothic. But they're kind of in that blend. I don't know where they're getting their terracotta, probably Kansas City, which was where a lot of the Midwestern terracotta makers were. They certainly were commissioning it directly, because you don't, off the shelf, get something that says Prescott Grade School or Clinton or Elliott. Maybe the Owls were out of a catalog.
Did they do special details in the entrance lobby inside the building?
The question is whether there are interior special details as well. There certainly are beautifully built inside. A lot of brick and tile walls, very durable materials, terracotta or terrazzo floors and stairs in many of those. Arched ceilings in some of the hallways, and then those big high windows in the high classrooms. Some of the libraries still retain some early significant features as well. The other, some future year, I could suggest we could honor Davis and Wilson school buildings of LPS as well, because there's a great collection of those. And they overlapped in the 20s. They were doing so much work that both firms were contributing major buildings.
I was doing research
Rebecca.
one time, and like Elliott's tower room, that was set as a music room. And I suppose that they claim, I think, it wouldn't disturb the other classrooms, but there was no air conditioning, so I can't imagine.
Comment that third floor room at Elliott originally was designed as a music room, like to keep the sound up high. It also would have had probably the best cross ventilation in the building, because I think it had windows, I think, on at least 3 sides, maybe all 4. If school board members had offices, which they don't and shouldn't, that's where I would have wanted my office, would be on that. I think they store books up there now because it's not very accessible and there's not really a general use you can put it to. But that's quite a special place. Eileen.
At Robbers Cave, the entrance that you showed with the 2 police officers, is that the same entrance that we walked in?
I don't think so. I think that's the Old West. I think there was a bluff side entrance. I think that was the one on the west. Although I don't get good distant views to make sure I understand how it all works. But I think the front entrance originally was the west side on the bluff, and then the staircase entrance was created over the many years that tourists and visitors and picnickers and maybe some beer partiers were visiting the cave. There was a staircase that had been built down from kind of the bluff top, and I think we're closer to part of that entrance system, although we're down in the basement now, so the entrance is pretty much on level with the cave, with the tunnels. I'm not trying to write the book on it. It's a pretty confusing place to me, but that's my understanding. Well, thank you for being here today and for stretching us out through a few questions.